Hey guys, Hippopotamus here. Today I'm going to be showing you another champion guide on Kassadin The Void Walker. Kassadin is a melee mage assassin-like champion who specializes in picking off enemy casters and carries with great ease and mobility. He excels at using this mobility to get flanks on enemies in team fights and tearing through anything in his path. Now let's go to Kassadin's abilities. Kassadin's first ability, Void Stone, allows Kassadin to take a passive 15% reduced magic damage and transform this magic damage that is absorbed into bonus attack speed. This is what makes Kassadin more of a anti-mage, as people like to call him, champion, because this effect applies after using your magic resistance. So it reduces quite a bit of damage, and it allows Kassadin to also have really high attack speed with conjunction with Netherblade, which I'll be talking about later. And Void Stone is just an amazing passive for Kassadin. It really lets him do what he really needs to do most, which is go in, take out carries, and go out. And another thing to note about Void Stone is that the ability goes off separate individual ticks, and whenever you're hit by a spell, Void Stone activates for 4 seconds per charge. So technically you can stack Void Stone charges and you'll have a massive amount of attack speed. I've seen Kassadin reach 2.3, 2.4 if he's hit with enough spells at the same time. But anyways, now let's move to Kassadin's second move, Null Sphere, which is his main nuking ability, where Kassadin launches a sphere-like projectile at the targeted enemy, and this does magic damage and silences the target for a short duration afterwards. This spell silences for 2.6 seconds at final rank and has a 0.7 ability power ratio. And Null Sphere is really Kassadin's main damaging ability early on in the game, and it's really good if you want to put on a lot of early game harassment. And always open with Null Sphere always open with it first in your combo, because the silence will allow you to get off a couple Netherblade hits and Force Pulse hit. And let's move to Kassadin's third ability, Netherblade. And Netherblade is a passive that Kassadin receives, and what he does is every time he attacks with his blade, he gains passive mana regeneration for hitting an enemy minion, champion, whatever. But this ability is tripled if the enemy champion is hit, or any enemy champion for that matter is hit by Kassadin. And this gives Kassadin most of his lane staying power, because if you're constantly last hitting creeps and getting a little bit harass auto attacks here and there, it'll really allow you to stay in lane longer, get more creep kills, and just take it to the enemy. And also to note is when activating Netherblade, Kassadin's blade glows bright purple color, so it's easy to tell. And upon the activation, you will gain additional magic damage by a set amount plus 0.15 of your ability power added in on that, which gives Kassadin much needed damage in melee. Before, Netherblade didn't give you extra magic damage on his auto attacks for activating it. It just gave you additional attack speed, I believe. But now that it does that, and really makes AP the only viable build. Not that AD or attack speed still doesn't work, I haven't tried it, but AP is definitely the most common and most effective build for Kassadin. But anyways, let's move to Force Pulse, Kassadin's fourth move. And Force Pulse allows Kassadin to collect or to absorb enemy spells or ally spellcasts, including yourself, around him. And upon reaching 6 spellcasts, Kassadin gains what's called Force Pulse stack. And the Force Pulse stack allows him to launch a powerful nuke in a 90-degree cone in front of him, or whatever direction he's facing. And this allows Kassadin to have a much needed slow in his combo rotation. And a good thing to note is that Force Pulse's range, I believe, is 650 to 600. So if you're trying to like gank and you need a force pull stack, try to learn the distance, because once you learn the distance, you'll be easily able to gather up stacks quickly and be able to launch force pulses out. And this ability also has a 0.7 ratio, just like Null Sphere, and always try to wait for your force pulse to be up when proceeding with your RQEW combo. And let's move to Kassadin's ultimate, which is probably one of my favorite ultimates in the game, Rift Walk. This is Kassadin's ultimate and final move, which allows Kassadin to blink a short distance around the length of Flash, give or take a little bit. I'd probably say a little bit further than Flash, and it allows Kassadin to move quickly to a targeted destination around him, and in a short AoE around him upon landing, around 200. The impact point is damaged by a certain amount, plus 0.5 of his ability power. And upon activating Rift Walk, you gain a stack, and when you use this stack, you get an additional 100 mana per cast, but your damage goes up by a flat percentage of 90. Not percentage, flat damage of 90. This ability can stack up to 10 times and last 7 seconds. This is probably one of the biggest AoE nukes in the game if you have enough stacks. And if used conjunction with a high mana build, Rift Walk will tear through enemies. And always remember, when you're chasing or running away, to watch your stacks, because a lot of the times I'll see Kassadins, or even myself, when you get enough stacks of Rift Walk, you'll go very, very quickly. And that's the other thing to note. And let's see, is there anything else? Oh, and the AP ratio of Rift Walk is also 0.5 plus an additional 120 per cast. Now let's move to runebook setup. Alright, let's look at my runebook setup. For Kassadin, I don't usually go too crazy on the runebook. I usually just keep it as my standard AP, as listed right here, where I grab Magic Penetration Marks and Magic Penetration Quintessences, with Mana Regeneration per level seals and ability power per level glyphs. And this standard setup gives me pretty decent laning staying power early on in the game. What you could do is, if you wanted a little bit more survivability, you could replace the Magic Penetration Quints with Health Quintessences or any sort of resistance quintessence, it doesn't matter. But generally speaking, I like to have a relatively high magic penetration book with all of my casters, because it scales so well into late game that it's almost invaluable. And then I just like to grab the extra mana regeneration for any caster that uses mana, because it helps you so much in harassment early game, which is very important as Kassadin, and just zoning your opponent. And you could also use pretty much anything for your glyphs. I've seen cooldown reduction work pretty well with Kassadin, but I just like using the flat AP instead of Magic Pen, because the Magic Pen only give you like 0.5 or 0.57 Magic Pen per glyph, and I think having 28 ability power helps you supplement that loss of Magic Pen quite effectively. So yeah, now that we've discussed my runes, let's go to my Mastery setup. This is my Kassadin Mastery setup. I do a standard 9-0-21 utility based build. I like to grab, most importantly, Expanded Mind, which is probably the most important talent out of all these, because when I go over my item build in game, you'll notice that almost all of my items besides Rabadon's and my Zhonya's Hourglass all have high mana on them already. So this helps supplement Kassadin's mana building, or supplementing his mana pool as you start getting items like Archangels and Rod of Ages, and you'll see a drastic increase in his ability power and mana from this. Nice talent to have. Other than that, I pick up Improved Flash, Presence of the Master, just increased meditation, Utility Master. Nothing out of the ordinary, really. Just a standard caster build. And then let's take a look at my spells. For spells this game, I will be using Flash Ignite, which is pretty standard AP mid setup. And the reason for me grabbing this is because Riftwalk won't get you out of combat all of the time. So having a flash is just like an extra blink, like 2 flashes technically. And this will really space the gap between you and an enemy, or when chasing an enemy, it'll really just close the gap, allow you to intercept anyone or escape from almost every situation when you have both of them up. And then the reason for me grabbing Ignite is because your combo early on in the game, usually it takes the enemy either from 3/4 or about a half of their maximum HP. So Ignite really helps the early game combos be more effective, and it'll really help you get a lot of early game kills. And even throughout the late game, the reduced healing and regeneration really helps Kassadin nuke down champions and then follow up with Netherblade chasing them down. But yeah, now let's get to the gameplay part of the video, the fun part.